Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to All Things SOPPA. Hopefully you're having a nice rainy day like I am. It would have been a good day to cancel school, cancel work because of rain. Been a good day to sleep in. My name is Chris Worley. I'm the Director of Technology Services for the Learning Technology Center. This is a weekly conversation that we've had since February 9th. I think we took 1 week off for spring break, and we may take a day off after Memorial Day, but overall, been a weekly conversation. We'll continue to have weekly conversations as long as people want to show up. We'll kind of play it by ear as the summer goes on and see what else we need to do as we approach July 1. But ultimately, all of the presentations that we've done are included in the slideshow. And also all of these have been recorded, as this one will be, and made available to you on the YouTube playlist that's listed there. And I'll also show you on the resources page where that's listed as well. And as always, feel free to contact me beyond the meetings. This is meant to be like an office hours type of thing where you can get your questions answered. But if you need more time or specific questions, feel free to reach out to me and schedule a meeting. Use that schedule a meeting link to jump right into my calendar and Calendly and grab a time. The first thing I did share in the chat, the link to the slideshow, but also we use Slido to figure out where people are as far as this process. And then also we're going to use this for question and answer. So just take a couple of seconds there to jump on to slido.com and enter the code Z972, and then share initially what your comfort level is. And I can't know whether or not in Slido if you can go on to the next question. But if you can, I don't know if it makes you wait until I go to the next slide, but. All right, so a few people still with comfort levels of 2 and 3, and I'm glad to see that that number's staying, the 4 is staying a little bit higher. And if you're at a 1, 2, or 3, the hope is that we move you to the 4s and 5s as we get going through the conversations and through sharing the resources and all those types of things. So thank you for sharing that. And then the other thing, I'm glad to know that that's available to you without me going to that slide. So again, very heavy in technology. And I might need to spread that out a little bit more and talk about instructional technology versus information technology. Even information technology is really not the right word for technology support anymore. Technology kind of encompasses a lot of different things. So it's one of those words that's kind of lost its meaning, I think. And that's for another time, another conversation. But I think we can kind of all see that in different things. The main reason why we use Slido is to get the question and answers in there. And we will definitely come back to this after a short presentation. So continue to ask your questions, upvote, those types of things. Really to get the questions going, what is SOPPA? The best place to find the answers to that is on this LTC webpage for data privacy, and down in the section for SOPPA, for Student Online Personal Protection Act. It'd be interesting, I should do that sometime, is ask the question, what does SOPPA stand for, and see how many can actually get that. I couldn't get it unless I'm looking at the screen, but and I've said it and talked about it for several months now. Obviously, this is the place to get the information about like what the background on SOPA is, what it means, actually looking at the law, reading through it at least once in your lifetime might be worth doing that. But also just checking out the resources here, a couple one-pagers, a short video for when you're having conversations with other people around this, and when you're talking about why you're doing this and what it means to the district. And ultimately, I think I've shared this many times, but when preparing for secure ed schools, not this past year, but the year before, we were talking about data privacy plans, and I read the book by Lynetta Tai about student data privacy. And the biggest takeaway from that book was not the laws that are on the books or all the processes that we're going to go through. It's just that protecting student data is the right thing to do. And that was the main takeaway, and kind of what I look at even with the stuff that we're doing with trying to manage data privacy agreements and SOPA, and even going back to FERPA and COPA and all those types of things. Trying to protect students is the right thing to do. And so that's why we're kind of in the middle of all this. There are a couple of resources here from a legal firm called Robin Schwartz that's in Illinois, works with many Illinois schools. And you'll notice in the presentation later that there's an event coming up tomorrow morning with them as well. So definitely research why we're doing this and the background on what SOPA is, and then what we're trying to do at the LTC is beyond that is helping manage the agreements through a system, a database from the Student Data Privacy Consortium. The Student Data Privacy Consortium, you may see a couple different abbreviations, and this is a good place to kind of cover those. Student Data Privacy Consortium is a international consortium that currently is in 31 states in the United States. California, Colorado, Massachusetts, Missouri, Wisconsin, Utah are some of the big ones, Texas, but also I think Iowa's coming along as going to be an alliance as well. But the Student Data Privacy has done some things over the last 5 or 6 years with this database. And then they also came up with the NDPA agreement that we utilize in Illinois as our basis for our data privacy agreement. And so those are, so the data privacy agreement and the other project is the database system that tracks all this information. And that's what the statistics are for. Each week, share those and where the data is going, and where it's taking or showing us that this is something that we're doing together, something that is not just about me and my school in my buildings, but it's also about the other districts across the state of Illinois trying to accomplish the same thing you're trying to accomplish. And so there's 602 district. I should have made a note of who the 600th district was. I can think I can figure that out and give them a call out next week. But the districts are signed up for the database. That's really what a participating district is. It doesn't mean that they've uploaded any agreements. It just means that they have the capability of doing so and looking through the database and have access to it. The number of signed DPAs you'll see, and it's always funny when I show this number, and then I do this around 12 o'clock on Tuesdays, get the numbers out of the database, and I've got a spreadsheet that I've mangled together to make all this happen. And I'll go back in to look at something and I'll see that the numbers changed even from like 2 minutes ago, that the number of agreements I think is over 5,300 now. And so it's just interesting to see how fast it's growing and what it's doing. And you can see that in the graph here with the signed DPAs, just week after week, it just keeps going up and up and up. The participating districts are growing consistently. And so that's another just a way for you guys to see that you're not alone in this process, and that the group is growing. Another way to see things that are growing is to continue to see the originating agreements that are posted, and just seeing that I put this out there just so that you can have one page to look at to see what those agreements are, and maybe if you have a list of what is in your district, you can just kind of go through there and check mark those and see what's going on. So refer to that as needed. So I think going back to this number of signed DPAs. So this means that there's that many entries in the database, and those can be so approximately 5,300 agreements. Those agreements can fall into several categories, but the three main ones are originating agreements, which and subscribing agreements, and then just standalone agreements that have none of that relationship of originating and subscribing. And I think we need to, and I think I need to make this a part of the regular discussion, and I need to send out an email to everybody, just revisiting this on a regular basis for people that are using the database and new people that are coming on. But originating agreements, you have to understand what the Illinois NDPA is. And in order to do that, you may need to watch a video on the YouTube playlist that I'll share with you in a few minutes, that I went through the Illinois NDPA and kind of talked about the background of it. But the main thing of the originating agreement is it's the full Illinois NDPA agreement that you send to it, that a district sends to a vendor. The district signs the agreement, the vendor signs the agreement, not necessarily in that order, but that's the idea, is that you're both signing the full agreement. The third component of that is that the vendor signs the Exhibit E to allow for subscribing to that agreement. So it allows the subscribing LEA that wants to subscribe to that full agreement to do so. And then the originating district will upload that agreement to the database. And maybe I need to fine tune. I just kind of threw this together a few minutes ago. So, but I'll fine tune this, but basically district signs it, the vendor signs it, the vendor signs the Exhibit E to allow other districts to subscribe to that full agreement. And then the agreement is uploaded in two parts. One is the full agreement, and then the other is just the Exhibit E document, the one page Exhibit E. I think it's page 19, depending on where it falls in your PDF. But they're going to upload both of those pieces. They're going to supply the email that the vendor supplied, and that's going to go into the database as well. And there's a video on the playlist to show you how to do that. The second type of agreement can be a subscribing agreement, and that is all made easier with. So I'm gonna lay these two steps out, but really there's just one step in it when you use the Auto Exhibit E Creator, and that video is there as well. Thanks to Sean Mullins from Olympia School District. And I always feel like I'm doing an infomercial when I do that. But thanks to Sean for putting his time and effort into making those videos, because they're very helpful for me to help point people to as well. But in the subscribing process, ultimately all the subscribing district is doing, and I need to add something here too, but ultimately all they're doing is signing the Exhibit E that the vendor originally signed at the top of the Exhibit E. So then the subscribing district is signing that Exhibit E at the bottom, and they're sending that Exhibit E to the vendor. That process is taken care of by the Auto Exhibit E Creator. So when you click on create an Exhibit E, it signs the bottom of that document, and then it sends it to the email that was provided by the originating district. And then the third type of agreement is just that, a standalone agreement that the vendor signs, the district signs, but there's no subscribing process to that. So there is agreements in the database that are only meant to be for the vendor and for the district to have an agreement. So the district will upload that. It's not an originating agreement. It's just an agreement between them and the vendor as a standalone other agreement if you're uploading it. So there is no Exhibit E, and there's some confusion on that. And it was brought to my attention just this morning, actually. And I'm just going to share this example. I'm not trying to call out anybody. I'm not trying to make anybody an example. I'm just sharing the example that I have because it really shows the power of the database and the collaboration that we're using for good and for incorrectness, and that it's not necessarily the proper way of doing it. So if I look at view all state DPAs, and this may raise other questions for you, and feel free to put those in the Slido. But as we look at the data agreements, Bueller, waiting for the search feature to show up here. Circle still spinning at the top. All right. So the example that was given to me this morning was Cengage, which I don't know what Cengage is. But if I look at, so I know what the situation is, but I'm just going to kind of explore here and show you some things in the system. And I think this is the value of what we're doing here with the office hours and with this opportunity, because there's 62 of you here that will know the answer to this situation. So if I sort on agreements, I can see that there's different types of agreements in here. I can see there's district modified. I can see that it says Illinois NDPA version 1A with exhibit A, E, or A. And if I scroll down here, well, if I sort by the other way, I can see that there's an Illinois NDPA version 1 with no exhibit. So, and you'll see that there's no exhibit E with those because those can't be subscribed to. And if I click on these that are with no exhibit, it should be between Township High School 214 and Cengage Learning. And the same thing, and I need to move my screen around here. Same thing with Rantoul. If I click on that one, I'm going to see Rant, and I can also see it in the file name. So Rantoul High School and Cengage. And so here's that agreement. And if I scroll down on these agreements, one thing that we've talked about before is whether or not to have this checked or not checked. It's important to have it checked if it is checked that way, or if the exhibit E is there, it's important to have that checked. It's probably not absolutely positively required, because ultimately what's going to happen is that what should happen is the exhibit E should be signed. And I think what we're going to find is that in this case, the exhibit E is not signed in any way. It doesn't have the email address there. It does have this name here. It does have this part down here, which that doesn't mean anything. That's actually incorrect as well. The originating district should not have this done. So this is an agreement between, so that adds to confusion. So the originating agreement should not be signed by the school district that's originating that agreement. And it needs to be signed by the vendor up here, which it's not. And if we look at all of those that are just exhibit with no exhibit, those should be that way. So if I look at Decatur, this is the one, Decatur's the one that brought it to my attention. So thank you, Jennifer Tuggle, for doing that. So if I scroll down to exhibit E, it's not signed. There's no email address. It's not signed. It's not even, they didn't even fill out the bottom. So that's the right way to do it. And they don't have an exhibit E here either to upload or download or anything. So what's happening is, if we, another way of a clue that could be figuring this out is, all these that have with exhibit, if I scroll over the top of them and look at the file name down in the lower left-hand corner, just like with all URLs, if you highlight them, it actually, and I don't know if you can see this or not, but in the lower left-hand corner, it says the SDPC for A4L agreements, and this is, the file name is actually Cengage, and then it's DPS 61, which is Decatur Public Schools. So what's happened is that somebody has, and that's not the point, is not the somebody, but this agreement has been subscribed to by the school district, Vandalia. So Vandalia's used the auto exhibit E creator to sign off on the bottom of that agreement, and but there's nothing to subscribe to. Cengage has not signed this document to be a originating agreement. They haven't signed it to be subscribable by another vendor. So what's happened is, if I sort by originator, I can see that this was, and this signifies that this is the originating agreement. So this is why it's showing up in the auto exhibit E creator, is that when I click on this agreement, this should be between that school district that's originating it, not the Decatur Public School one, because this agreement's not subscribable. The exhibit E is not there for it to be subscribed to. So ultimately, what the process should be is with Cengage. Ultimately, you have to reach out to them, and they will have an agreement that's not a subscribing agreement. It's just an Illinois NDPA agreement version 1. So when you upload that and you go to add new agreements, they're going to give you an agreement, but it's only going to be a national standard agreement with no exhibit. So there's no exhibit E, there's no originating, there's no subscribing. So when McLean School District uploaded this as an originating agreement, it really wasn't an originating agreement. And so what's happening is, if you go to the auto exhibit E creator, it looks at those originating agreements as they were uploaded by a school. And so that's here. And so you, as subscribing districts, so I mentioned that in the slideshow, the first describing, so district sign the exhibit E, and then send it to the vendor. The other thing that needs to be here, and I need to do a better job of this too, is saying that you need to look at that original agreement that's here to understand what's going on. So the first clue that, and maybe this is something I need to put in my little checklist I'm going to share with you next, is that this is Decatur Public Schools agreement, not McLean County's agreement. So that's clue number 1, that this isn't going to work, that this isn't a right agreement, because 1, they're uploading another agreement, and then 2, if I look at this exhibit E, the exhibit E should be signed at the top by the vendor, and then the bottom of it should be blank. So that's something that's going to have to be fixed. The good thing is that within the database, we have the list of all the schools that have done that, subscribe to that. so we can reach out to them and let them know. We can reach out to the one that put it in there and have them redo it another way. But ultimately, there is no originating agreement for Cengage. And so when all of these districts have subscribed to that agreement or created an Exhibit E on that agreement, Cengage has gotten an email from them, and they're like confused because they don't have a subscribing agreement, and so that's why they're confused, and they reached out to Decatur because Decatur's the one that the agreement is showing up on, and so so we've been able to track down. We'll be able to communicate with all these school districts that are in here. Ultimately, if you as a school district find this that you have an agreement that isn't really an agreement, you can come in here and delete it. So if you're one of those schools that subscribe to that particular agreement, you can come in, you can delete that if you need to do that. And that will be something that if when we communicate out, we'll include the steps to do that so that you can, but it doesn't mean it's going to be easy to fill out that situation. I guess in this situation, what you need to do is there is no originating agreement. So you have to reach out to Cengage to get that agreement. Yes, Sally's asking a question. Subscribing is the same as piggybacking, and that is correct. And sometimes we use, subscribing, piggybacking, same thing. All right. So
Michelle had a comment or had
Okay.
a question too. What would be a scenario for a standalone agreement?
So in this case, this is a standalone agreement. It's not a, it's an Illinois NDPA standalone agreement with the vendor. And let me just bring up, I can do it this way. So if we look at Cengage, and that's not really the right way to look at it. Let's look at it through, I don't want to look at it that way because that's, I want to look at it through the way that Decatur uploaded it originally. And I can see where the terminology is getting confusing because, and I see your comment in there, Beth, too, about vendor specific. That's even different than some of these other things. So if I look for the district name for Decatur, so the way this is showing up, there's district modified, there's Illinois NDPA with no exhibit. So Illinois NDPA with no exhibit, they've used the standard NDPA agreement. The only thing that they didn't do was use the Exhibit E. So they've done everything with this vendor, but the vendor's chosen not to engage in the subscription, the piggybacking process of using the Exhibit E. They want this full agreement signed by each district and then uploaded by each district. And so this is a standalone agreement between Decatur and Cengage. And then if we look at, there's another one in here, the district modified one. This one was actually something that CUSD 300 uploaded, that they already had this agreement in place prior to this database, using this database. So they just uploaded this agreement for themselves as a standalone agreement. And it's using their own data privacy agreement. They're not using the Illinois NDPA agreement for that. So this is something they entered into last May. And then going back to this page with add a new agreement. Oh, my Chrome just crashed. Let me find my share button again. All right, let me close out of some of these PDF documents. And just briefly, I'll touch on the vendor specific thing. And there is a video that I did about the database, going through all the menu choices, and I'll show that to you in a second where that resource is. But when adding a new agreement, basically we have an agreement. So in Decatur's situation where they uploaded that agreement, but there was no Exhibit E, that's what this agreement is. So it's a national standard agreement. Nothing's changed beyond that they didn't sign the Exhibit E. So that would be this agreement here. And that's not an example that we use a lot. That's really kind of an exception. The national agreement with the Exhibit E is uploaded here through the originating agreement. And on the slideshow, there's a video that talks about that. This one, these two we're really not using anymore because we're using the auto Exhibit E creator. Obviously, it is possible to use these, but there's extra steps involved with all that. You can do everything through the auto Exhibit E creator, as long as the originating agreements are uploaded originally the right way. The difference between vendor specific and national standard agreement, and again, this I think this is in the videos going through the full things that we did the last few Mondays. But the national agreement is everything up to through Exhibit G. Exhibit G is the state terms and before. So that means that the vendors have agreed to be within that limitations of that agreement. The vendor specific comes in when they decide that the vendor decides that they want to make some exceptions in Exhibit H, and that's when it becomes a vendor specific agreement. So the vendor is making it specific to them that they have specific things in Exhibit H that only pertain to their relationship between them and the vendor. And you can either have that with an Exhibit E or with an Exhibit E or without an Exhibit E. So if you need clarification on that, please ask. And watch some of the other videos that are available to work through those things. All right, let me jump back into the slideshow and we'll get running here. Do I want to present? Yes. And then I want to exit out of full screen. All right. So back to our regularly programmed. All right. So this checklist, again, this is available in previous All Things SOPPA, but basically this is a checklist that you can run through as a subscribing district, piggybacking district, or an originating district, and have that information available to you as you're going through that agreement. And I need to add onto this that idea of the of what district is listed on the originating agreement when you go to subscribe to it. So that would be a check that we need to check on. Future enhancements for the database, please, if you're seeing things that are not the screens are weird, or things are slow, or things are something like that, that is a database related thing, that is a usability type of thing, please make suggestions on this Google form to send along to the national team at SDPC, because that's something that we're looking at trying to make some enhancements. And so the more stuff that's on that list will make it a better solution for all districts in Illinois, as well as all districts around the United States. All right, so I've been talking a lot about the resources. So on this webpage, as part of the linked in the slideshow, the navigation to get to the database and all those types of things are here. If you haven't joined the database yet, you can click on this button and find your school district and join. I need to get some newer events up here. This is where you'll see upcoming events. The actual Illinois NDPA document is here. Some getting started PDF documents are available for you to download and use as resources, whether it's in conversations with people in your district, or whether it's just for you to use as a additional tool. All Things SOPPA conversations are all recorded and available on this YouTube playlist, as well as the May 3rd and May 10th and April 26th events that I did, going through and looking at the full database, and then talking through the Illinois NDPA and how that works. So that's a good 2 hours worth of fire hose information for you to listen to. The All Things SOPA slide deck is available there. And then this is the how-tos. There's 20 plus videos here, everything from just getting started, so joining that ISBE button, through the stuff that I linked on the database today, as far as the Originating Agreement, part 1, part 2, and then the auto exhibit creator process here. And then those 3 videos are also available in that playlist. So check out that resources page. It is full of information, and that's where I would point you in some cases with certain answers and to questions and things like that. So utilize the resources. Press policies are available for you. Press is the Illinois Association of School Board policies for all things schools, and one of the things is policy 7345, which deals with some things around SOPA. Has some administrative procedures and exhibits that you can use. If you don't subscribe to press at your school district, you can still have access to these policies, these specific policies, by emailing, by clicking on this link here to get to that information. And then there's a slide deck and a webinar that we did back in March for teachers, the background information, and then what teachers have to do within their school districts, or what is suggested, but ultimately it's suggested that you check with your school district to find out what you're going to do, and then communicate with them. I mentioned this upcoming event coming up tomorrow morning. This is through Robin Schwartz, not LTC or anything else. So it'd be a good third-party resource to know more about what, from a legal perspective, what they're seeing and what they're seeing with their schools and those types of things. And then we have our webinars and different things. We had our Be Connected sessions are coming up and wrapping up for the school year, but we may do some stuff over the summer. Also, Microsoft, we're doing a couple different things with Microsoft. Our Intune one from last Friday was postponed until June 18th. So that's a reschedule, so that you can register for that if you're available. And then this summer, we're doing our IT Summer Summit and Showcase. So check that out. It's an opportunity for both IT, as in information technology, and instructional technology, opening it up a little bit more than we usually do for the IT Summer Summit and Showcase, because we're also using some vendor presentations from IL-NDPA as well. All right, so question number one is always, what about Google, Apple, Microsoft, and Adobe? I don't have much to report here other than I know that specifically Microsoft has reached out at least to one school district, maybe a couple, to have people look, their legal teams look through the document that Microsoft is presenting. So hopefully we'll have something there soon. Google, I know, is being, we're working with them at the national level as well with the Student Data Privacy Consortium. All the states have sent in their Exhibit Gs Exhibit Gs that are state specific, and then they have the NDPA. So really trying to take advantage of what we have from a national level and use that leverage to help this process with places like Google and Adobe. We're working with Adobe through a reseller, and that's really all I have at this point with that update for those. All right. So that went a lot longer because I spent a lot longer in the how-to type of stuff, but I think it was important that we kind of clarified some of those things. So if there are questions, please vote up the questions. Probably will try to end right about 3 o'clock today. But if there's questions that don't get answered or don't get answered to your satisfaction, please reach out to me, schedule a time, talk to me, all those types of things. So please share questions, experiences, just like Decatur reaching out today was very helpful and able to pass along that information to you during this time period. So do you need an agreement for a web resource that just collects IP addresses and cookies? IP address is listed as PII. Couldn't that be every website? It's so no, you don't need an agreement with a web resource if you're just worried about IP addresses and cookies. It would be if that student's name was associated with that in any way. So if they're logging into a website and they're doing something, creating something, doing an assessment, doing anything that would collect that information associated with that particular student, then and you would move that application to the next step as far as like, do I need to get a DPA with this? So you're more than likely to get a DPA if a student's information, name, email address, something like that is being collected. So really no movement on Google other than I know it's at the national level, and I missed I have a meeting on Thursday with the national data privacy project team. So project team. So I'll have more information next week for sure. I understand that we don't have to get a DPA for ISBE stuff. What about the IHSA? Ultimately, it depends on what that information is. If it's like directory information, like you're uploading rosters and stuff like that, probably not. But if there's more to it, it just is ultimately going to depend on what the applications are doing and what you're doing with it and those types of things. So I think if it was IHSA, you would, if it's necessary to get a DPA, you will have to get a DPA. It's even if you thought that you needed a DPA with ISBE, you're not going to get a DPA with ISBE. So if it's requesting information, like if IHSA is passing you on to another vendor or something like that, then you would probably work directly with that vendor, or if IHSA was responsible for that data and the upload of data, then they would be the ones that would be responsible for it, not you. But going back to some of those, some other conversations that we've had, just keeping a list of things where you have student information. So even if it is directory information, you're uploading rosters and those types of things to sites, I think I would just have a list of those somewhere. IHSA, IESA, even just stuff that you send to the newspaper, just that you have, like, that's not part of SOPA, that's not part of having a data privacy agreement. That's just part of knowing where your students' data are. Student data is, student data are, in relationship to, you may have collected it originally, and then you're passing along that information as well. So
Chris, Joe has a clarifying question about that,
yep.
some IHSA activities use third-party tournament sign-up or management software during the regular season that collects information from schools.
It's like a speech team competition. You need to create rosters for speech team tournaments. That's done in a third-party system, even though it's an IHSA activity. The state series is IHSA, but the regular season is a third party.
Yeah, I'm going to say that that's any information that you're probably uploading into that is probably going to be related to the FERPA law and student directory information, and what you make available through your student data or your student directory information with relationship to that. And that's probably something we need to get some clarification on, as far as like making sure that those agreements are not agreements, but those policies are in place and what those policies need to be. We've talked about FERPA several times in the different secure ed things that we've had this year. We didn't really talk too much about it. But I think in relationship to what we're doing with SOPA, we need to get a better understanding of that type of thing. And obviously, like, somebody mentioned media release and those types of things. So it's definitely something that we have to, you have to be aware of as a school district, that I don't think, I know I wasn't aware of when I was in a school district, like the example that you're using, Joe, of the third party putting in your lineups or whatever for speech or for, I mean, I even created one, actually, now that you're saying that, I created a database for our local literary contest in the county, and I collected all kinds of student information from schools for that, and it was in my own personal database, and not personal database, but a database at school that really probably wouldn't have fallen under a DPA, but at the same time, like, all that information was in a database somewhere and wasn't like within the realm of those other 8 county schools that put trust in me to have that information. So good question. What about I'm going to start at the top and work down. We have found many incorrect agreements. Can we get some sort of up-down voting system, maybe with comments, to be able to warn others not to use improper ones? That's a good question and statement and idea. So I will definitely, I'm going to actually screenshot this just so it's on top of my mind, to try to think about that type of process and how that could work. But definitely, even if it was a ongoing Slido show, that's a good idea. If our school uses Zoom next year, will we need to get a DPA for it? Most likely, yes. I don't see why you wouldn't have to, because if you're allowing students to log into it, then that's yes. If you're not allowing students to log into it, it's just for teachers to use, then you wouldn't have to, but I'm assuming that the question is working with students in the classroom if they're still remote. So yes, you would have to have an agreement. What happens to subscribing agreements and if the original agreement is canceled or deleted? And it's not going to go away. It's really just deactivated in the system. The relationship's still there between that original agreement and the subscribing agreement. Obviously, from a legal standpoint, that is something that we will have to figure out, but the relationship's still there. And so we'll have to look at those situations on a one-to-one basis and see what the situation is, whether they canceled it, how it was deleted, all those types of things. So if a site uses SSO and allow creation of data, but claim they don't collect student data, what do we do? We're going to have to, that's one of those one-off situations that we're going to have to figure out. And ultimately, lawyers are going to have to be involved with that question, like, are we going to need a DPA or not? But I think, so there's there's multiple things here in this question, and I'm reading into it, but when you say claim, that's a big word, and that's one of the reasons why I'm glad we're having these conversations, is because we didn't have these conversations before about like what data they're collecting, what they're not collecting, all that kind of stuff. If they are not collecting student data, then no, you don't need a DPA. But if they claim and they are, then maybe we do. So definitely, oh, I think I shared my screenshot with everybody, thinking my clipboard was available, but that's all right. Good thing my clipboard was clean. So did I answer that question? Ultimately, those are the types of questions that are going to be a collective answer. Like once we get a definitive answer, it's going to be something that every district can benefit from. So it's still something that we can definitely talk about, but I don't think there's any specific answer right now. But if we know that they're not collecting student data, then we don't need to have a data privacy agreement. If there's still some question in there, then that's when we have to we're gonna have to try harder and figure out why we're doing that. Any updates on Exhibit E for GoGuardian? I'm not sure. I'll have to double check on that to see if what the situation on that is. And I'm clicking off these questions. They go into an archive. It's not like I'm just letting them go into the wild blue yonder. Our superintendent has stated SOPA is a process that takes months and we won't be ready by July 1st. How do we respond? Aren't we in violation of the law? I'm glad you're anonymous. Ultimately, if you look at the legislation, the accountability is with the Attorney General and the Consumer Fraud Act or something like that. So ultimately, we had Eric Grocky on with State Board a couple weeks ago, and not that it's an ISBE thing, but ultimately, like a lot of things, best effort is going to be important, that you're trying to do the things, you're figuring out things. SOPA it's not just a takes months thing. It's going to be an ongoing thing. Every app that you're going to use, every application that you're going to use, you need to vet it and make sure that it's got a data privacy agreement, it works in your curriculum, it's budgeted, and all those types of things. So I think it's an ongoing process. The problems with not getting your data privacy agreements and all those types of things is that we just need to be concerned about what that means for students and all those types of things. So I'm just taking a glance at the chat, and I think Beth did the same thing that I did. She copied and pasted her clipboard.
It's a really nice cafe in Arlington Heights, around cafe. Sorry, that was my bad.
That's funny. So yeah, the superintendent's going to be the one that's going to answer to all those types of things. So I'm not the judge and jury, but they should definitely communicate with their attorney, communicate with their other superintendent friends, and ask questions about all those types of things. More of sharing. Grammarly has said that they will not enter into a GPA agreements less than 2,000. Has anyone gotten an agreement with them? So yeah, ultimately vendors can do whatever they want to. If they don't want to enter into an agreement with you, they don't necessarily have to. What that means for you as a district and using those applications will be up to you and your school district, as far as, are you going to use Grammarly at that point? Are you using it with students? Are you not using it with students? Are you using it only with teachers? Those types of questions are going to come up, and you'll have to deal that. That's kind of the same thing. The weigh the risk of what's best for students, and what, if there is no data privacy agreement, what that really means. Can we have a column on the public facing resource site that allows admin to list app restrictions? Want to list what is and not acceptable for teachers. I believe there is the possibility of doing that. I will make it a point to make that a part of next week's presentation, or put it out in the YouTube notes of how to do that. But I think you can list those app restrictions currently.
Yeah, because this question came from me, Chris. So
Okay.
I followed the directions you gave me last time, and the thing is, when I tried to put my more specific notes with specific directions that told teachers what they could do, it appears on the admin end.
Okay.
I can see it when I'm managing the app, but when I go to look at what the public site is, where we're going to direct teachers to go, it doesn't appear.
Okay.
So I think I'm doing something wrong, or maybe it's a feature adjustment that needs to be made.
Okay. Yeah.
And
I
also
can follow up on that.
Yeah, I scheduled a meeting with you too. So
all right,
we can talk then as well. Thank you.
All right. Sounds good. My colleague wants to know if the column name of data can be changed to data.
Also me. Also my question. Basically, my colleague, at the end of the public facing website, there's the column that says data, and you can go in and see what kind of data is collected. They want that column moved to the far left, so it's right next to the app name. And they also want you to have the ability to pick none, so that if it's one of those apps where it doesn't actually collect any data, like a teacher resource, because we're trying to use the consortium site as our one-stop shop for here is everything in the district that we use, no matter what, so that teachers don't have to search through a variety of documents.
Okay. So, yeah, that makes sense.
So that was one of, I also put it in the Google form as a product request.
Okay, great. Yeah, and just even some customization of that form of what appears and where it appears, and that's a good request. So we can definitely pass that along. When are we considered SOPA compliant? And we'll scroll through here and look at some of these other questions here before we wrap up. But definitely if you do, and I'm just gonna throw this out here because we're gonna end in about 5 minutes, and want to make sure that you know that you can schedule a time with me, use the resources from the slide deck to contact me, schedule a meeting with me, review the resources that are on the YouTube playlists and different things. And then come back on Tuesday next week and we'll answer some more questions. So let me get back in and answer a couple more questions if I can go the right direction with my arrows. When are we considered SOPA compliant? So this is a good question. I don't think you're ever going to be totally, well, I don't know what SOPA compliant means. We'd have to define that first, but ultimately, utilizing the resource listing, having those data agreements and the resources that you have access to, that's the primary purpose of, or one of the public facing things of SOPA that shows that you're quote compliant with the law, in that a school district lists out their agreements. All right. I got to get a cordless headset. I keep stepping on it and I lift my leg up to relax a little bit and then I put it down and it rips my head off. That's great. So the 1-page document that is on the SOPA page, the what I would call the SOPA page, the data privacy page. If you look at this legislative brief on SOPA, this is a 1-page document. And these are the things that are necessary for you to, the requirements that are requested of the district. That's also in that data on the ISBE website as well, or not the ISBE website, the services ISPA website. Another way of looking at it is through, I think this one has that document listed as well. District requirements right there. So those would be the 2 places that I would look to see if you're checking off all those boxes as far as like, do you have the services listed? Do you have data agreements with those that are using student data, and those types of things. So those would be the kind of checklist for SOPA. I wonder how ISBs will be engaging the accountability of SOPA compliance throughout districts. That's a good question. And I don't think any of us know the answer to that at this point. Obviously, that's going to be a big lift for, I mean, just as SOPA is a big lift for you as a district, it's going to be a big lift for ISBE, ROEs, whoever to put some accountability in there. Ultimately, it's legislation from the lawmakers that SOPA came through, so it's probably not necessarily something that will come soon, but it may be self-reporting or something like that initially. Yeah, that's a good question and definitely going to be talked about. So do we need agreements with our ISPs? Probably not, from the sense that I think if you parse the law and looked at it, like, I think you would come out on the side that you don't need to have an agreement with them. I can kind of see having some type of agreement with them. Like, we just, I mean, at the school district I was at, we just basically entered into an agreement, paid them money month to month, and that was it. Like, but yet all of our traffic's going through there and all that type of stuff. And just, so I can see why that question be asked, but I don't know that it probably pertains to SOPA necessarily, but there probably needs to be some level of knowledge of what they can do and what they can't do that may need to be considered at some point. Does the federal government need to sign a NDPA, for example, myplate.gov? I don't know that they need to sign an NDPA, but again, if that's someplace that you're, I guess it would be worth exploring to know. I don't know much about MyPlate, if it like has profiles set up for individual students, like what they're eating and those types of things, but that would be a good question to follow up on and put in some kind of system, just thinking along the lines of what people were talking about earlier with the system to know good things and bad things that are happening in the data, not bad things, but incorrect things that are happening in the database for agreements, but also like listing out sites for, like, do you think we need to have a data privacy agreement with that, and just having conversations around those individual applications to know. I mean, it wouldn't take too many conversations around that to maybe figure out if it does or doesn't, but then if somebody did have some definitive answer, like they could share that and we could maybe mark that as being the answer for the current time or whatever. So that's something, and I really need to go. What's going on with Apple? I did kind of, I didn't mention Apple when I mentioned the other update, because I don't really know where we're at with that. I know we talked with lawyers from Apple at one point, but I don't know if they got connected with anybody in Illinois lawyer wise to take the next step to figure out what's going on. So I will follow up and see if I can have an update for that next week. All right. Thanks, everybody. If I didn't get to your question and there's some specific that you need answered, reach out to me. And I'll get this uploaded to the YouTube playlist. And again, thanks for hanging out with me.